Hello, everyone. Welcome to Matter's signature Tales from the Trenches series. My name is Stephen Collins. I'm the CEO of Matter. We are a healthcare technology incubator and an innovation hub with a mission to accelerate the pace of change of healthcare. Tales from the Trenches is our longest standing series here at Matter, where accomplished entrepreneurs share their journeys from how they got started to what they've learned along the way. And today we'll be joined by Eren Bali, who's the CEO and co-founder of Carbon Health. Eren's a serial entrepreneur. He has a passion for human rights, and it's become really his life's mission to address disparities in education and in healthcare, which inspired him to start Udemy in 2010 and Carbon Health in 2015. Eren, thank you so much for joining us. We are really looking forward to hearing more about your journey and the promise of Carbon Health. Leading the conversation with Eren is Dr. Suzette McKinney. She is a principal and director of life sciences at Sterling Bay. And more importantly, she's a Matter board member. Suzette has held a variety of public and private sector healthcare leadership roles. She is a nationally recognized expert in emergency preparedness and response. You may have seen her on CNN or NBC or ABC or recognize her name from the Wall Street Journal or the Chicago Tribune, where she's been featured. Suzette, thank you so much for joining us today and for leading this conversation, and I'll turn it over to you now.
Great. Thank you, Stephen, for having me today. Thanks to you. Also, thanks to the larger team at Matter. And Eren, hello and welcome. It's wonderful to have the opportunity to speak with you today and learn more about your entrepreneurial journey. I think the first thing I would say is, the Tales from the Trenches series is really designed to, dig deep into one's personal story and their background. So that's what I'm hoping to do today through this conversation. So why don't we jump right in? And the first question that I'm going to ask is, when did you first become interested in entrepreneurship?
First of all, thank you very much, Suzette, for just having me here, give me the opportunity to speak. I did not grow up with an entrepreneurial mindset, to be honest, because I was born in a small village in southeast part of Turkey. Essentially, 99% of my family were like farmers. So my mom was a teacher. She was, I think, first college educated person in our family. And I was very interested in mathematics kind of growing up. So that was essentially my ticket to get out of the village and do some more interesting things. But I started in college, I thought I was going to be a mathematician. But when I was first starting the college, our college supported double majors. So instead of just studying mathematics, I studied computer science and mathematics together. And I was very interested in building things. And this was 2000 in Turkey, where I had no idea what the startups are. I had no idea like these companies, tech companies, just had no knowledge. I didn't even know that Amazon is a real company. I thought it was just somebody's website, right? So, but second year in college, I did not own a personal computer, so I was just using the computers in the university labs. So we were just kind of camping there. I was staying up till 2 a.m. Every night. I was very interested in programming, like building things. And I had to go for an internship over the summer. And when we go to internship, we wouldn't have our computers because we have to now use the corporate computers, which are very kind of strictly guarded, you cannot install anything. And I like listening to music. So I built a browser-based music player so that when I go to my internship in the company, I can continue to listen to music. And this was 2001. So the concept of building rich media application was just a non-existing thing. This is just roughly when Napster was happening, but Napster required you to install software, which means it couldn't work running on my employer's computer. So I built a browser-based tool from very little kind of simple components, and you could just make a playlist for yourself, and you could add music. The music, I have to admit, it was not really copyrighted necessarily. So that was very fun. And when I built it, I opened it to other people, and it became used by so many people. And the campus at the university shut it down. So, but I kind of realized I just enjoyed building products. more than just the academic nature of mathematics. So, and I think for last year in the college, I knew I want to be an entrepreneur. Again, I just didn't understand the Silicon Valley like venture fund, the technology entrepreneur concept. That concept was just, I had no idea that it exists. But at this in the last year of the college, I said like I want to have a small company, maybe build products for people and sell it. So in very, very small scale, I decided last year, and like before I graduated, I started my first company. And I think this is one of the things I just want everybody to understand is like here we are privy to like the understanding of large tech companies. You can start something, it will be huge. You can be the next Elon Musk, like Zuckerberg, like that actually, like at least when I was growing up was not nobody in my area like even remotely knew that this was like this was a possibility.
Sure. Wow. Well, you talk about liking to build things. So let's dig into that a little more. I mean, your first company that you built, Udemy, is one of the leading online learning platforms. And you started that company in 2010, and it now offers more than 100,000 courses and serves 60 million students. Mm-hmm. For our audience, I would inform them that the company went public last year with a large market cap. Well, what was the genesis for you building that company?
Yeah. So I started Udemy actually a lot earlier, like 2010 is when we formally started company in Silicon Valley, but it actually goes a little bit further. So in 2006, I attempted to build that company in Turkey first. The genesis was my belief that in the future, internet would become everybody's primary learning destination. So, and the reason I thought that way is because I grew up in a small village where my mom was the only teacher in the whole area, not just our village. Like she was in the next, like for like 10 villages around, she was the only teacher. She would rotate between classes. She would teach first grade there something and for 10 minutes and switch to the second graders, third graders, fourth graders, fifth graders, and come back, right? So obviously it was not really the place you could get the best education, access to education. And I was very interested in mathematics, but really I did not have a lot to do with my mathematic interest. So, and this only changed when I was a little bit older, and my family, like we were living in the village, and over summers we would actually work in a farm, just gonna make the ends meet because my father had 8 siblings and his parents died really early. So it was just really 3 siblings and like seven or 8 uncles and aunts. So over summers we'd actually work together in a farm. With most of the time it would just barely make ends meet. And this was one year when we got some extra, like the produce became like larger than we thought. And I think my father had like disposable income for the first time, right? So, and his goal was to kind of take everybody to a family vacation. But then I kind of lobbied to kind of buy a computer instead. I'd never seen one, but I just knew it was like just the bridge to the rest of the world. So my mom convinced him, and so we bought a computer and internet access for a couple of months. And like at that point, I realized like I found all those IRC channels. Like if anybody remembers IRC here, where people were discussing kind of more competitive mathematic problems, and I started self-teaching myself mathematics. And long story short, I ended up winning the gold medal in Turkey's national math Olympiads and silver medal in international Olympiads. Mostly like self-teaching myself using whatever I could find online. And I'm not saying this just gonna kind of really brag about it, but to me, like it is critical to understand that billions of people in the world, like having access to internet or not, like can be a really binary drive like outcome, right? So for me, like if I didn't have access to internet at that age, like none of this would happen because those things opened other doors for me. So especially in my personal like experience, I kind of thought internet was not going to be completely make everything equal for everybody. It was not going to create like fully equity, but I thought it had a chance to kind of create an opportunity for people to catch up. Sure. So, and I was still in Turkey. I decided to build a product which would allow everybody to teach online, so that my goal was maybe one day, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people would be teaching online or on my website, so everybody was going to have access to education. Initially, I thought it should be a free platform, so I started the company in Turkey. That didn't work. Just there was really no ecosystem in Turkey. Like not many people were online. Honestly, even the bandwidth, like technical infrastructure was not there. So we had to shut that down. And I moved to Silicon Valley initially because we had borrowed some money to start a company. So the concept of raising angel funding, we just didn't exist that much either. So we had to borrow money to kind of start the company. So we had to just pay it back. So I came to Silicon Valley to kind of take a job and pay the debt back. But here I realized like the whole world was very different. And in 2010, we restarted the company in Silicon Valley. So my co-founder from Turkey came to Silicon Valley, and we met another co-founder named Gagan Biani. So Oktay, Gagan, and I, we just kind of restarted the company. And this time, like, again, it was not easy. It still took us a long time to get it off the ground, but eventually we got some traction, we got some angel funding, and company became a reality. So, but there was at least like a 4 or 5 years that people don't know about the company's history. It became an official US company.
I appreciate you sharing that story though, because I think it's important for all of us to understand that these types of things don't happen overnight. You know, there oftentimes can be quite a long period of, you know, blood, sweat, and sometimes maybe even tears to get to where you're trying to be. So you started out in education, and then at some point you pivoted to healthcare and started Carbon Health. Tell us a little bit about what the inspiration was for starting Carbon.
Sure. So Udemy, like eventually in 2015 or so, it was a sizable company. It had escape velocity. So I thought back then that like the right thing to do when the company you get some success and you're an inexperienced founder, like I thought the right thing to do was really just finding a new CEO to take the company to next steps, right? So I stepped down, and at that point but I had this thought about healthcare being the probably even bigger problem when it comes to just giving people access to changing their lives. I was always again interested, but I had no idea where to start. And before I kind of stepped down, my mom had this disease called neuropsychosis, which essentially resulted in her entire body to have kind of stroke, right? So, and I had to take a couple months off work, move back to Turkey. My sister's a physician; she's a nuclear medicine specialist. So she had lined up a lot of specialists to kind of check what was happening, and I was not that useful, to be honest. So, and I started observing them that like my sister had printed out thousands of pages of documents from the EHRs. Like she printed out all the labs, she was highlighting everything. She printed some screenshots from the PET scans and MRIs. So cataloged them nicely, categorized and put some notes around it. And we were going from specialist to specialist. And I made the observation that like she had to do all this work to organize the data, because the data, it was not really, the EHRs did not really properly model the data in the first place. I kind of saw how bad the tools that the doctors were using were. So I being an engineer and designer, I actually sketched out, made some sketches about how I would build a healthcare care platform if I was asked to do, right? So I just made some sketches, left it there, went back to United States. My mom recovered, so honestly, we didn't like pay too much more attention to it. But several years later, like I just came back to those sketches and said, doctors are probably the most scarce resources of the world, right? So every single country has this like a big limitation, and they are using horrible tools. Essentially, we're optimizing Uber drivers, like taxi drivers' time a lot more than we optimize physicians' time. And it just didn't make sense to me. I just said like, I should just build a better product tool for them. And when I was kind of working on it, I realized there was an even bigger problem, which was that really the tools were bad, but also there were operational issues. There were other workflow stuff. Generally, healthcare was a very complex operational service industry, and it required a more technology-centric approach. And what really disappointed me was there were all the startups which were in the intersection of healthcare delivery and technology, but they were all trying to be healthcare provider for Google employees. And nobody was really trying to like make healthcare better for the average teacher, average retail employee, the more mass market population. So there was way too much emphasis on improving care for young, affluent techies or like people like that, like not enough in like mass market services. And there were things like virtual care solutions, which were obviously more mass market, but like I was just really thinking about it just broad, like having physical locations, just more like a comprehensive care. So I thought, okay, the bigger idea was really building a extremely vertically integrated healthcare provider that can make healthcare like 10 times better for consumers without increasing the cost at all. So that just simple idea, just I said, I realized was like could be potentially one of the largest companies in the world.
Sure. Wow. That's fascinating as well. Let's talk a little bit more about the success that Carbon Health has had and, what your vision is moving forward. So far for Carbon Health, you've raised more than $500 million so that you could scale the company. You now have more than 100 locations and what seems to be, continuously growing fairly rapidly. And you've also acquired other companies like Alerted that are working in the telehealth space, and Steady Health that's working in diabetes care. What's your vision for healthcare and omnichannel care, I should say?
Yeah, so the vision was really creating a healthcare provider that can create the blueprint for the future of healthcare. Right?
Okay.
Because we all have ideas about how healthcare is going to happen in the future, but we are very far from it.
Yeah.
And for future of healthcare to happen, somebody has to lead the charge and do some of these things 1 or 2 decades before everybody else can replicate, right? So kind of part of the really broadest vision was like, let's just really figure out let's really create blueprint for like healthcare's future. And we specifically wanted to start in the primary care side, broad the primary care, because most consumers' first decision in healthcare is a primary care, or urgent care in my mind is a part of primary care. In my mind, honestly, women's health, men's health, these are all like primary care. So we kind of want to start from there. And we actually started really small. So we only raised a couple $1 million. And I brought together a physician, engineer, designer. It was me. We had a nurse who joined us as the first team. And then we rented an office space to work, and we separated half of the office to be a clinic, primary care clinic.
Okay.
Very quickly from scratch, we built a primary care clinic. And we did not use any third-party EHR because I knew they were horrible. We said we are going to build everything from the ground up. I actually made it forbidden to even look at other EHRs. So I said we have our clinicians and nurses and patients. We'll just figure out everything from first principles. So we worked for a very long time in a very small scale. I think in 2016 we started. 2017 we started having the same first patients. In 2018 we partnered with a small urgent care chain in San Francisco to kind of do this on a larger scale, and became like more vertically integrated. But really we took at least 3 years optimizing the workflow of the providers, the medical staff, patient experience. We just really kind of first wanted to prove that we can provide a better patient experience. Then we had to prove that we can do this while maintaining an amazing provider experience. Then we had to prove that we can do both of those things while having reasonable unit economics, so that this is not a philanthropy, because this company has a scale. So it has to make enough margin from services so that we can kind of grow this. So we took at least 3 years without really scaling that much, right? So we just optimize unit economics. We raised more money in that process, but like it does a lot of like iterations. And by 2019, we finally got to a place where the core 3 things were working. Like unit economics were working, provider experience was working, patient experience was working. Then we just decided to scale up and add more locations. So since 2019, we've been growing very fast. Like we had 7 clinics in 2019. I think we got to something like 40 the year after. Now we have 125 as of now. We are adding 3 clinics per week, most weeks. So we'll probably get to like 250 by the end of the year. So at this point, we are by far the fastest growing healthcare provider. But part of it is because we took our time to optimize it before we start scaling, really.
Sure.
And really the acquisitions are just part of it, right? Because we don't see ourselves as a primary care network or urgent care network, to be honest, or like we do mental health as well. We have a lot of different services, but like the more tactical vision was, let's just build a 21st century version of Kaiser Permanente. That's really what we are trying to do. We'll have more broader set of services. We are starting from primary care. But Kaiser's model is extremely heavy. It requires hospitals, insurance plans. It can only like work in a very small number of cities. It's really hard to replicate and distribute it. Instead, what we are doing is we are trying to build a primary care layer, which is nationwide. And then we are getting deeper and deeper as needed. But we don't have to do everything. We are actually also very open to partner with other providers, right? So we partner with other providers, we send them patients, we kind of integrate with them. So we have health system partnerships, we have like honestly other kind of platforms. But the idea is like to build a very tightly integrated network of providers which are really collaborating to provide care to the patient. And eventually we want to also take full risk on the patient's total cost of care. So we want to have partnership with the plans or even launch our own plan for individuals. But we do want to provide some of the service level services directly, partner with other providers, and really kind of capture the total economics, and so that we can actually iterate on clinical care without having to get permission from insurance companies.
Sure. I love the way you describe your vision and how you've approached your work. I mean, what jumps out to me is that you're both a visionary and a disruptor. Yeah. But as competitive as healthcare is and can be at times, you really understand the value of collaboration and how that collaboration can really seek to maximally improve patient care. I think that's fantastic. So what does the future of Carbon Health look like? You know, talk to us about perhaps your, you know, speaking of collaborations and partnerships, what about your partnership with Him and Hers Health? And how that seeks to improve the healthcare and partnership ecosystem.
Yeah. So when we think about the next like 5-10 years for Carbon, like again, tactically geographic expansion. We are going to become the first nationwide primary care network. But and when I say primary care, again, it includes urgent care, virtual care, like some of the more services. And chronic care management is an important part of it. That's why we acquired Steady Health, and we now like actually this week, announced the Carbon Diabetes program, which integrates continuous glucose monitoring and all the other channels. So, but really, geographic expansion is the first thing we are doing. In parallel, we are trying to create a much more comprehensive primary care solution, which we call omnichannel care. What we call omnichannel care is really meeting the patients where they need to get care and always holding their hand throughout the process. So if you come to our clinics and want to join our primary care panels, but you have diabetes and hypertension and maybe you have an anxiety problem, right? So we don't want to just kind of say, okay, this is out of our scope, just go find somebody else. But instead what we do is like for the diabetes program, if you're eligible, we put a continuous glucose monitoring sensor on your arm. We figure out how to get you kind of reimbursed for that. And then our endocrinologists actually oversee your care. You go home, you open your patient application and log your meals and other symptoms you're seeing. Such as a very comprehensive program, which has virtual, in-person, hardware, like all those different modalities. And we are trying to integrate them so well that you almost never worry about what's next. So that's an example of type of thing that we do everything inside Carbon, this is what we call omnichannel healthcare. But no matter what we do, we are never gonna manage all the care for everybody, right? So we have to just pick our battles. So currently we are more focused internally on primary care, urgent care, and just kind of chronic care management, especially for diabetes, hypertension, and 2-3 other kind of chronic conditions and mental health, right? So we're just building those services directly, that's the service expansion. But simultaneously, we're trying to partner with other healthcare providers to create a more seamless experience for our patients. And this comes in a couple of forms. So one part of it is we partner with health systems for really acute care, right? So we have partnership with Stanford Healthcare, Freight that we announced last week, John Muir, Prime Health, we have partnership with North Bay Health. So, and we're actually adding these partners very quickly, and we build deeper integrations with them. So when our patients need a transplant or like orthopedic surgery, they can be very seamlessly channeled back there, and then we can just get their medical records back to Carbon. So, but there's the other side of the table is when we are the escalation point for most virtual care companies. If you use Hims and Hers and you need to see a provider in person, they do not do that. They're like real good at the virtual, like their service lines, such as they send patients to us and we have a nice kind of care collaboration. And this is very important because everybody talks about how interoperability was broken in traditional healthcare system, but the reality is digital companies, digital healthcare providers have not done better. Digital healthcare providers are just as disjointed as traditional healthcare providers. And because we are building all those really expensive physical infrastructure, one of the things we said is like, it doesn't make sense for everybody to build the same physical infrastructure because it's very expensive. All these different virtual care companies, all the remote patient monitoring companies, all the home diagnostic companies, when they need physical access, they can use our physical footprint. And we are a software-driven company, so we can actually connect with their systems easily, right? So essentially, that is like started hims and hers, but there are going to be a lot more companies where we become the we become the physical access network that they can easily integrate with.
Sure, sure. Well, you know, when we started this program today, Stephen in his opening remarks talked about Matter and Matter being a healthcare incubator, and I'm sure that the large majority of our audience today are healthcare entrepreneurs. So I want to, you know, focus a little bit now on, you know, just your thoughts around entrepreneurialism, I would say. So I guess the first question I would ask is, what do you think is the biggest entrepreneurial mistake you've made? And how do you make sure that you don't repeat some of your past mistakes that you've seen in your entrepreneurial journey thus far?
Yeah, I would say there are a lot of them in different stages of my career. So when I first started Udemy in Turkey, the biggest mistake I was making was confusing what is technically hard as an engineer to what's important.
Sure.
So we first started Udemy with a live education platform. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a feature, but that was even though there were a lot of signals saying otherwise, partially because building a live classroom tool was just more technologically difficult, right? So I think in healthcare, this happens all the time. People are trying to build some. So when they have a hard problem, they think it means the solution has to be some like really complex software. But in reality, often like the most practical solutions are like SMS integrations or like some really simple things, which just happens to be in the right time, right place, like integrated the right way to the care. So it's really just separating difficult problem to solve and like importance is very critical. So that was when I was really just started my first company. One of the other things I learned when I was doing Udemy was important lesson is that you cannot think of product and distribution as two different things. You just have to design distribution into your product from day one. Like, so that means like you have to understand if you are building a solution, how are you going to distribute it? And sometimes when distribution is very challenging, what you have to do is understand what distribution channels are viable and really think about what kind of product you could build that actually integrate, like that actually matches the distribution. Sometimes actually you even go the other way because, as an example, a lot of healthcare entrepreneurs are building solutions that they just have to sell to large insurance companies or hospital systems. Mm-hmm. And that's really, really difficult. There's a pilot hell in healthcare. A lot of companies die before they get out of pilot, right? So that's very difficult. So, and that's like if you have to do that for sure, you just have to have 4 or 5 years of runway, a lot of stamina, because you're going to go through like some really slow process. That distribution channel is difficult unless you happen to have some unfair advantage. Like maybe you were the CEO of Providence Health and like, you know, everybody like that might be a different situation, but for a normal entrepreneur, that's just not going to be the case. So you just have to understand in healthcare, like how are you going to distribute the general solution? And you have to understand what makes your solution easier to distribute. And you have to build it that way. The reason we chose primary care, even though primary care is not one of the most expensive parts of healthcare, was because I want to get a lot of patients by providing amazing customer experience. Right? That was going to be our edge. If we built a neurology service, it wouldn't work because consumers don't make a lot of neurology decisions. They pick their primary care doctors, and their primary care doctor refers them to a neurologist most of the time, right? And most of the time also there's the coverage is very limited, so they don't even have a lot of options, right? So it's not if you want to win by providing better customer experience, You just have to pick something which is a consumer decision so that you can get word of mouth growth, right? So like we literally changed like how we start at tackling based on where we think like our strength can bring distribution, right? So I think this is essentially not thinking about distribution. Essentially, thinking about distribution after product is the biggest mistake. And in the contrary, if you look at serial entrepreneurs, people who have success, sort of multiple successful points, that's the biggest difference between what they do and first timers. Is like they know distribution has to happen, so they think about it before even they can finalize the details of their product.
Right. You talk a lot about starting out in Turkey. Clearly, you're very proud of your Turkish heritage. I am interested in hearing about your experience coming from Turkey to the United States. Do you think that perhaps being an immigrant has made it harder to build a business here, or does it not make a difference?
Yeah, look, it certainly makes it harder, and it was definitely an intimidating experience to be in another country where you don't speak the language as well as everybody else. You have an accent. You also just kind of hard to like chit chat with other people, and you feel less confident in the room. So that was definitely a friction. But on the other hand, I just don't want to undermine that. Like United States, with all its faults, it's still something not to take it for granted, right? At least as an entrepreneur, even though it was harder than probably somebody who grew up in the United States, it was possible. In reality, in Turkey, it's a lot harder to start a successful company if you're not already coming from wealth, right? So a lot more of the tech companies in Turkey were actually until recently were started by people who are already like major business owners, the families which kind of control the country, and major of the world actually works that way still. So I would say, yes, it's not perfect. As an immigrant, you have a lot more challenges that maybe natives, people who were born here don't experience. But also, as I said, it is not impossible. So it's difficult, but not impossible. So I still essentially appreciate the opportunity I was given. So while still trying to make it better easier for the next entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm. Well, what advice do you have for entrepreneurs that are listening in today, or perhaps those that are just starting out?
Yeah, there is a lot, but I would say there is the reality of the role like that they have to face as early as possible, because it is unfortunately not fair, right? So everybody starts in a different angle, and if your jobs, your experience, honestly, even your family relationships, all those things do kind of influence things, and they give advantages to kind of certain people. But on the other hand, it's not a human right. Like this is not, we're not expect not everybody's gonna have a very successful large scale tech company. So this is one of the things where look, there are certain things that you have to just assume that you deserve, right? Like so everybody, I think, deserves access to good healthcare, good education, and a setting childcare has to be universally accessible. So there are some of those things which have to be human rights. But starting companies is always going to be extremely competitive endeavor, and some other people are going to be ahead of you. So I think it's important to understand like your strengths and weaknesses, and really be realistic and realize that like your chances of success is not very high, but it's also not zero. So I would say like for me, like just I lost a lot more time not understanding what was possible, and being kind of feeling intimidated from everybody else, which felt like these things were easier for them. They knew how to talk, they knew how to pitch their ideas, and they had like friends who could help them. So, but I think just kind of facing the reality is like, it is what it is. I'm just gonna make the best out of it was probably my thing. And one of the tactical things I was gonna say is I would suggest is always try to build connections, like partners, especially when you're starting your first company. Having a couple co-founders very important. So like this is a very difficult thing to do. It's also very hard to face it alone. So, and again, other people might have it easier, but like you just have to kind of do whatever you can do to make it easier for you as well.
Yeah, I think that that's really great advice. One of the things that I always tell some of my young mentees is that you really can't compare yourself to others, and you have to resist those feelings of intimidation, although it can be very difficult to do so. So I appreciate you saying that today, because I think that the entrepreneurs that are listening in on today's discussion, that's very valuable information and sage advice for them. So I appreciate you saying that. So now, we've talked a lot about business. I want to switch and, talk more about Eren and Eren as a person and the things that you do for yourself. So one question, I guess, more serious, and then I'll go to a more less serious question. What do you do every day, you think, that contributes to your success?
So let me actually introduce myself a little bit more in personal life, right? So
yes.
I have 3 little kids right now. So I have twins who are 3.5 years old and a 2.5-year-old. So it's pretty busy at home. It kind of feels like a zoo sometimes. So, and I'm very close with my family. So when I look at really just myself, I had always some really simple goals in the life, right? When I was a child, I just wanted to be a good son to my parents, and I grew up, I got married, I wanted to be a good husband. I started companies, I wanted to be a good boss. Like, I'm a father now, I want to be a good dad. So I actually have never just wanted too much. Actually, I'm relatively happy with where I am. I'm in a very good position, but even when I wasn't, I was generally thinking about what's what I have that's is actually privileged. I grew up in a village with very little access to most things, but also I had the privilege of really supporting kind of close family relationships. We have a very large family. I have 55 cousins. So I grew up with a lot of support from cousins, and you never feel alone, right? So it is I think in a day-to-day, I busy between kids and business, there's really not much free time. So I play a little games. Tuesdays and Friday nights after the kids go to sleep, we play games with a couple of friends. But other than that, I really don't have much I'm doing. And anyway, for me, just between my family, the kids, that's actually kind of what just interests me, and then the business interest is a kind of nice complement to that.
Sure. Well, I was going to ask what you do for fun, but I think you've answered that. So maybe what's your favorite activity with your kids? I mean, obviously they're very small. They have lots of energy, I'm sure. Yeah. And you've already said that sometimes it can feel a little bit like a zoo. So what's your favorite activity to do with the kids?
I love going to beach with them. So we actually moved to Southern California because the beaches are a lot nicer and everyone's now working remotely. So they love the water. So they just want to walk around. And it's kind of interesting for me because I grew up in the mountains. I was probably 9 hours away from the nearest beach. So I don't think I'd been to a beach until I was probably 14, 15 years old. So, and I always kind of wanted my kids to grow up in a beach town. So that was a kind of unachievable dream for me. So now the kids are in a beach town, and I like that. That's kind of my favorite activities, when they're in the water enjoying and we're with them. But I personally like playing games. If I was not doing anything and I was single, I'd probably be playing 10 hours of games every day. And I had to specifically stop that and just limit it to only a couple hours per week.
Yes. It's funny that you mentioned that, because I actually like to play games too. And there's this one very old video game that I love to play from the 1980s. And for some reason, all of my friends want to challenge me in playing this game. The game is called Galaga. It's sort of like a space ship, and the spaceship has to kill the alien ships that are coming down from the sky. But it's, a lot of people don't understand gaming and video games, but it's really a great release and lots of fun and, kind of an escape. Yeah. So, Eren, if you could give any advice or say anything to your 20-year-old self at this point, reflecting on all of your experiences and everything that you've been through, both in business and just in life, what would you tell 20-year-old Eren?
Yeah, I would tell him that they're all those people like you look at as kind of idols or like very successful people, like you see on TVs, like celebrities are another dimension. I was playing a lot of chess, so for me, like grandmaster, like Kasparov was the person probably I would want to meet the most if I was like 20-year-old, so or like a child. So, but just realizing pretty much all of them are other humans. Like they're actually like, if you meet any celebrity, you always get disappointed. So like if you, I guarantee all this like people here, if they meet like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, they'll realize like this, like they're a lot less smart than they thought they would be. Like, so I mean, they're smart, but like they just, everybody's human. Some people like, there's really not much that's just too much like out of scope. I think sometimes when we just look at these people and kind of think too much about them, it kind of makes them feel further from us, and we actually do not find the energy to try to reach there. So, but really, I would just number one would be like everybody's a human. Nobody's like as strong as like invincible that they kind of look from a TV screen or kind of whatever screen you're seeing them.
So, what is your hope for your children? If your children come to you one day and say, "We are interested in going into business," what would you say to them in response?
I really want my kids to just find like things that are passionate about, right? And just have the ability to follow them. If they have a passion that could be a business, and that would be awesome, I'd be very happy about it. But if they have passion towards like music or arts and other stuff, I or like politics, I would be just as happy. If anything, like, I mean, I started companies, but I still, let's say, envy other people. Like I always wanted to be like better at like visual arts. Like I always want to make a movie. Like if you ask me, my dream was still like being a director, so which I haven't been able to achieve. So, and I think that a lot of successful, interesting paths in life is not that linear. Actually, I think like if anything, I think we are over promoting this whole entrepreneurship concept. Is like that's not. I think the benefit of entrepreneurship is when you're successful, it also comes with money and like resources and everything. So that's nice. But like other than that, I don't think that's actually necessarily that much better than being an academician or artist or scientist. Like as long as you kind of let that just interest you.
Yeah. Well, so we've talked quite a bit today. I feel like I should say, monopolized the conversation. So I would remind our audience members that if they have questions that they'd like to ask today, to feel free to go ahead and drop those in the chat. We have just under 15 minutes left in our time today. But Eren, I think at this point, I would open it up to you. What would you like to talk about, or is there anything else that you'd like us to know about Eren that we haven't talked about today?
Yeah. So I think a lot of people look at me. I started a company in the education space, which became fairly successful. And healthcare, it is becoming successful, but I think there's actually an illusion of size. So yes, we did raise a lot of money and we have a large team and everything, but still there's a lot more ahead of us we have to achieve before I can call ourselves successful. So, and these things all start really small. I think this is really finding just a small thing that interests you, that you become good at, and some other people want to kind of use your product for. That actually is the starting point, and actually can turn into a massive thing. Like I never thought Udemy was going to be as big as it is today. So I thought it was going to be useful for some people, but didn't really kind of appreciate the size it could get to. And also it could also be a lot larger than it is today, right? So, and like everybody just kind of goes through very similar emotions, really, just like there's a lot of failures and ups and downs. We gave up on Udemy idea exactly 4 times. Like 4 times we just said, this is not working, and we just stopped working on it. And we just came back because there was a voice internally which was saying, there is still something we just haven't been able to execute it yet, but we thought the underlying idea wasn't bad. Right? So we just came back to it and eventually just found a way to make it work. So it again, what looks like success doesn't look as smooth as it looks from the outside. But also, I want to avoid this like hustle porn concept either. It doesn't have to feel like dread either. It is just usually a mix of like, oh, I did this thing which is working, awesome, it's very fun. Some other days you realize something's not working. So it's just a mix of ups and downs. It's not a pure hustle and torture that you have to kind of suffer through, or nor is it just some like really kind of rosy road. It's just really in between.
Sure. So the questions are starting to roll in, but one of them that's related to what you just said was, was there ever a point in time, when you talk about starting over with Udemy, was there ever a point in time where you lost motivation? And if so, how did you overcome that?
Yeah, that happens pretty frequently. I assume as a founder. And the first thing is, if you are doing it for the first time, you just need co-founders. When your motivation is down, you need somebody to lift you up, right? So that's actually very critical. And as I was starting Carbon, like my wife also became this like support there. Like whenever I feel down, she's always kind of being able to like lift me up. So that's one. The second thing is, you want to take what you want to do from idea to reality as soon as possible. Because the more it becomes a reality, it's harder to get demotivated and give up. You just essentially want to decrease the chances that you're going to give up, because you're always going to have moments of lower motivation. You just have to not give up.
Sure.
I have a belief that like marriage as an institution is still useful, because a relationship is easy to give up on. Sometimes marriage makes it a little bit harder to give up. So I think that's just the main value of marriage, is like it just makes separation one tiny bit more difficult, which is actually useful, because marriages go up, like relationships have good and bad moments, right? So it's similarly, like your journey is going to have bad moments. You just want to build some structure to just make quitting a little slightly more expensive. And you have like real users of a product, for example, it's just like, that's the type of thing that makes quitting harder.
Sure. So what about incumbents in healthcare? For example, payers. You talk a lot about the patient experience and just improving the level of care and the provision of care. So what should incumbents in healthcare do differently?
So I believe healthcare has a lot of issues, but it's not because people in healthcare are evil. To be honest, if anything, we overestimate how much evil there is in large companies. Like, for example, insurance companies get the most criticism. They're still made up of a lot of people who are trying to do the right thing, and similar to like health systems, PBMs. Like, so I think there's a lot more. Like, I actually believe a lot of the healthcare problems, the root cause is just the most difficult, most complicated service industry, right? It requires far more competence, far more optimization, efficiency than any other industry. It's also consuming a very expensive resource. And the reality is, like, we have an imbalance in talent. Like, we have way much talent. We have too much talent that goes to optimizing ads, right? If you look at the world of advertising technologies, they're very like people who are very smart, that are working there all the time, just optimizing something that doesn't have a lot of society impact, right? Mm-hmm. And healthcare traditionally hasn't received a lot of this, like the talent that can actually make things better, right? Especially in technology and design, like those type of principles. I think really the key thing is just like being able to attract more talent into the healthcare and try to like work together to improve things. That's what everybody else does. And what we are trying to do this in Carbon is just like a small scale of it. Like, we have very strong mix of engineers, physicians, designers, legal, like operations, people just really working together to kind of fix the problem in our landscape.
So in optimizing talent and increasing talent, does Carbon recruit primary care physicians?
Yeah, like we have more than 4,000 people. Majority of them work in our clinics. So they are primary care clinicians, urgent care, like nurses, medical assistants, front desk people, some customer support, billing. Like, there's a lot of, actually, majority of the company is in some sort of like service industry. And actually, that's one thing I like about Carbon is, like, my job is like, we are creating jobs practically. You know, one day we'll have millions of employees. So, and these are good jobs. These are the jobs that are able to lift people out of poverty relatively fast, right? So, like, one thing I really enjoy is, like, we have front desk jobs, which are kind of lowest, I would say, like most like entry level jobs in our whole, in most of the company. And some of those early front desk folks we have, which are in the company for 5 years, Now they're like regional directors, like overseeing 200 people. They have a very good job, right? So it is, I think, I like the kind of job creation aspect of it. It's also very diverse, like a very diversified job. Like we have the diversity of our employees, both in corporate teams and headquarters, like, and the clinic teams, pretty much align with our patients, right? So like I think we have 7% women, 60% of all managers are women. And we do care about diversity quite a bit. So yeah, so it's a lot of different jobs. But then on the other hand, we also like designers and engineers and machine learning specialists and operational efficiency people. So it's like a nice mix of clinical and technology people coming together.
So did you always do this direct hire, or did you start out as a marketplace?
I thought maybe it would be the marketplace the first year of the company. But then we opened one clinic just so that we can control it better, and get better feedback. But then we realized like this whole marketplace idea was not a great idea. So we kind of wanted to be extremely vertically integrated.
Sure. One of the questions that our audience members would like to know is, how do you increase utilization of your platform at Carbon?
Yeah, I mean, that's the most like financially difficult problem. So because when you create physical locations, there's a lot of fixed investments. Like you have rent, you build a clinic, which costs money, and then you hire people who are going to work there no matter how many patients they see. So the thing that you cannot fail on is bringing enough patients to the clinics so to make the unit economics work, right? Because when first open clinics, all of them are losing money. We just have to turn them profitable as fast as possible. So it means like we just have to be really good at customer acquisition, patient acquisition, very good at retention. Probably retention is our strongest suit. So we're really good at keeping our patients, like, and making them loyal, repeat rates, word of mouth, all those things. You just have to kind of optimize patient experience. I mean, utilization is, again, like that's the most difficult problem.
Sure. I think another very important area that entrepreneurs frequently want to hear about, not only how you manage your business, but also just as a leader, how do you prioritize important decisions? How do you evaluate your success? I imagine, you develop a suite of KPIs or other measures that would, in your opinion, indicate success, but how do you do that? How do you prioritize those things?
Yeah, so I have a fairly unique view on this, and probably disagrees with majority of technology world. So I come from computer science and mathematics. I'm sufficiently technical, right? So let me put it that way. But I don't believe there's any data, any amount of process that can give you the right decisions. I actually lean very heavily into hiring people which I think generally cares about the business. Again, not the business, but the general cares about what they do, and really putting them in the position of insights and really make like trust in their intuitions. Like I'm a far more intuition heavy person than a typical entrepreneur. I look at data always with some amount of skepticism, right? So look, movies have been around for forever. There are good movies and there are bad movies, but we still don't have a metric which tells whether a movie is good or not, right? There are ratings on IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes, there's box office numbers and all those other numbers. None of them are perfect, right? So we understand like just because there's good and bad doesn't always mean that you can find a clear metric. So like we do find metrics, but I don't run the company with numbers. I run the company by really just like hiring the right people and just a lot of back and forth conversations to figure out where we are going. And the number one value I drafted for the companies, if you go to our website, it's called Assume Karma Exists. This idea is that there's karma in businesses, and if you do the right thing consistently for a long time, you're going to be rewarded more significantly than if you are just optimized for short term. And the key idea is there is like you won't know how it's going to come back, but you have to believe it that it's just going to come back because it does. In practice, you do the right thing consistently, it does reward. Like you get rewards eventually.
Sure. Well, in the last few minutes that we have, I want to go back to Eren, the entrepreneur who came to the US from Turkey. So many of our audience members have put in the chat how much they've enjoyed just hearing about your personal story and your family and your background. And so I guess in our final couple of minutes, talk to us about your continuing or remaining connections to Turkey? Do you still have business connections in Turkey? Is that a part of your business? Do you have a team there?
Yes. So I had both Udemy and Carbon have sizable teams in Turkey. So I think at Carbon we had 25 people or so. We'll probably get to a couple hundred eventually. So I always like building a team because hiring, especially like engineering talent, is very difficult. So wherever you have competitive advantage for hiring, you have to utilize it. So we do have competitive advantage in Turkey. I think so. I also go there pretty frequently. We are actually building a new house so that I can go there with my kids because now our family is too big to fit in our parents' house. So because all me and my sisters have all kids, so building a new house. So it is like I go to my village and actually I don't actually go to Turkey and like spend time in like vacation towns. I spend at least amount of time in my hometown. Still pretty close with a lot of my family relatives. So yeah, I do want also my kids, if I'm lucky, my kids will have some connection too. Like one of my fears is that they're not going to have a strong connection and maybe they won't want to go, but I really hope it will go the other way.
Yeah. And I imagine you also get a great deal of inspiration from being around your family, your extended family, and also in the village where you grew up. Yeah. So very, very quickly, if you can tell us, what's the next problem you think you will try to solve for?
So healthcare is a big problem. So I think it's going to take a while. So honestly, I don't think there's no like timeline for me because this like I'm going to be working at Carbon for the foreseeable future.
Sure.
But one of the other area that interests me personally is like consumer robotics. So whether we can, I think robotics field is way behind where it should be. And I think software was the biggest bottleneck in the past, which has actually been accelerating really quickly. So anyway, if I was not doing healthcare, I would do robotics today. But again, healthcare is so big and I don't think there's any kind of schedule there for me.
Sure. Well, Eren, thank you so much. This has been such an amazing discussion today. It was certainly my pleasure not only to meet you, but to have the opportunity to just engage in this conversation with you. So I really appreciate it on behalf of Matter and the entire audience watching and listening in today. I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for being so open and honest with us. And with that, Eren, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Suzette, Dr. It was a great conversation.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.